Keeping It Young podcast is sponsored in part by TWR360.org, giving the world powerful Christian content in more than 100 languages. Visit TWR360.org, the global internet platform of Trans World Radio. Hey, welcome to Keeping It Young, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethany.
And we're the Youngs. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. And we're so happy to have you on board again this week. And we've gotten quite a bit of feedback here and there about the series we've been doing on emotions and personalities, and we're always happy to hear from you.
Absolutely.
And you can reach out at our website, evangelistdaveyoung.com, send us an email from there, or if you go to the keepingityoungpodcast.com, you can also reach us there. I mean, many of you who've been with us know we've mentioned so many times about the voice email you can send us. There's a microphone in the lower right-hand corner. Just tap on that microphone. It'll tell you what to do there. And if you hit send, make sure you include your email address if you want a response. Sometimes we get a really good question, but there's no email to respond to. So make sure you give us all the information there. And then just send that to us, and we receive those. We try to get on those as fast. Sometimes we get a ton in 1 week, so it'll take us a couple of weeks to get to you. But if you do send us a message and you don't hear from us, there's a good chance it got lost. That does happen. We've had a couple times where we realize a person will reach out. We never saw that, never received that, not sure what happened there. So please, if there's something important you're trying to reach us about and you don't hear from us within, a couple of days or a week or so at the most, reach out again. That never offends us to hear from you again.
Right.
And just send it again or start over again. But we are always happy to serve you and to help you. Those of you that listen and would like to hear us in person, you can certainly find our itinerary online as well.
Yes.
And that's available at the Evangelist Dave Young site. You'll see schedule. There's a link to schedule. If you'd like to be a part of our newsletter, you can sign up there as well on the Evangelist Dave Young site. And Beth and I travel frequently. We do couples retreats, we do marriage and family conferences, and we do revival campaigns. Even do some overseas missions work from time to time. And we just love serving the Lord, and we're very happy to be a part of your life with the Keeping It Young podcast. So thanks for joining us.
Yes, and we'd love to meet you on the road, too. If you look at our schedule and you see that we're going to be in your area, we would love to meet you. We love it when people come up and they're like, hey, we don't go to this church, but we came to see you and we listened to the podcast. We love that. We love to meet all of the sweet families and couples that listen to us and singles that listen to us.
Absolutely.
I was going to say that I would be very interested if any of our listeners have a humorous story that involves a relationship in their life that has to do with introverts and extroverts. Sometimes those two personalities coming together in a relationship, whether that's a friendship or a marriage relationship or a parent-child relationship, sometimes it can end in a humorous story. So if you have a humorous anecdote from your family, we would love to hear it based on this, and not that you are tearing down anyone, obviously, just something that both of you thought was funny, an evening that ended kind of weirdly or awkwardly because one of you is an introvert and one's an extrovert. We'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. That would be very encouraging and entertaining, and maybe something we could share online.
Absolutely.
If you're willing to let us do it. And that would be great. So let's jump in today's lesson on extroversion and introversion. And this has been an interesting study because we are living in a culture where you hear these words all the time now.
Yes.
Well, he is such an extrovert, or those crazy extroverts, or she is such an introvert.
Right.
And or even more often, well, I'm just that way because I'm an extrovert, or I'm just that way because I'm an introvert. And what we have discovered in the Word of God is that God doesn't give us information so that we can explain or excuse.
Right.
It's not just so I can explain, well, this is how I am and here's why I am. It's God's fault for making me this way. And it's certainly not to excuse behavior that is damaging our marriage or our family or even keeping us from serving in our local church.
Right.
All the information that God gives us about these matters is to help us so that we can focus on others. And you want to read that text for us again from Philippians?
Yes, I can.
This text makes things so clear on how we are to take our personalities and the way God designed each of us uniquely and how we are to apply those in light of God's Word. Read this passage from Philippians for us.
All right. This is Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 3. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men.
And how does that start again? Look not every man on his own things,
Right?
but every man also on the things of others.
Yes.
And that's the whole basis for what we're trying to teach here, because we're handling extroversion, introversion as, together, rather than do one on introversion and one on extrovert. We're putting them together because the answer is not that, we need to change our personalities. The answer is that we have to walk in the Spirit, live for others, and continually grow. As we walk in the Spirit, even if I'm an introvert or an extrovert, I still am to walk in the Spirit. I'm to live for others. I'm to continually grow. I'm to serve. I'm to be aware. I'm, an extrovert. I'm still to listen. I'm still to invest in relationships, not for my sake, not just so I can feel all fulfilled, but so I can fulfill others.
Right.
And an introvert is not to withdraw from relationships because I just want to be alone. I'd prefer to stay home and pet my cat, or I'd prefer to stay home and read a book, or I'd prefer to stay home and watch TV, or whatever the list may be. The whole point is that, no, God gifted me in the way that I am so I can serve others, so I can reach out to others, so I can minister to others. And this is super important to understand. Super, super. And what a great text to explain that.
It really is. And I think, too, one of the key words in there is, or phrases that Jesus took upon himself the form of a servant. And that is our mindset, whether we are an introvert or extrovert. I almost put those two words together. But whatever our personality trait would be, that we are constantly thinking, how can I serve another person, even with my personality?
Absolutely. And isn't that interesting too? That because in that text, he tells us what Jesus did. He took upon himself the form of a servant. But it also tells us how he did it, because he says, let this mind, this thinking be in you.
Right.
So we do have to understand who we are. We have to think right about who we are so that we can serve right in our families, in our marriage, in our church.
Yes.
And so what an important truth. So last week we started with some general truths, and let's just touch those briefly. Both sides of this personality matter are designed by God.
Yes.
And the point Beth and I made was that God didn't make an accident in making your husband an extrovert or your wife an extrovert, or vice versa. God didn't make a mistake when maybe you and your husband are really quiet people and you're introverted, but all of a sudden you have a son or a daughter that is wildly extroverted. They are high energy. They just thrive on being around people. You've got to be careful as a mom or dad that you don't damage that. That's how God made your son and daughter and gifted them.
Right.
And if your child is introverted, you don't want to damage that. On the other hand, neither do we want to excuse those behaviors, because we learned last week, on both sides of the personality matter, both sides struggle with a me problem.
Right.
We become very aware of me. We can become arrogantly aggressive. We can run over people, or in the words of my sweetheart, we can bulldoze people. Introverts can be selfishly introspective and withdrawn.
Yes.
And both sides of this can damage the believer who wants to develop godly relationships in their marriage, their home, and the family.
Right.
So that was just some general truths we started with last week. Let's take the time we have today and let's just talk about evaluating, discussing. Let's evaluate ourselves and the steps we ought to take regarding where we are on this introversion, extroversion, situation, this personality. And I told the story last week about the pastor who said crazy extroverts who take it to new levels, or the sorry I'm late, I didn't want to come. And yet,
for the introvert,
and yet those are matters we've got to evaluate and take the right steps to make sure that we're not damaging relationships because of our personality. So let's start with the extroverts.
Okay.
Let's start with that one. And relationships, extroverts know that relationships are built on talking, but can sometimes fail to realize they're also built on listening.
Yes.
And so maybe the advice we would give to an extrovert there is that in your energy level towards other people, make sure that you are also mastering the art of listening. Don't run over people.
Right.
Don't bulldoze people. Again, quoting the words of my sweetheart. We have to I don't know where that just came off. I just remember that.
That was from very early in our marriage.
It was.
But yes, it must be something that's still on David's heart. So maybe after we record, we'll have a little conversation
and have a little.
Make sure he's okay.
Yeah, I think I'm okay.
Yes, okay.
No counseling needed. But as an extrovert, we can also say to you, learn to focus on others and their ideas and beliefs. One of the books that often is so good on both sides of this, it's not a Christian book necessarily, but it's a very practical book, is the Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I remember when I read that book, how simple, because I think it's like a businessman's salesmanship type book, but I just remember how simple it was, that he talks about smiling. You smile. You remember a name. So no matter whether you're introvert or extrovert, you can smile at people. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can remember a name. And especially for an extrovert, you learn to ask questions and listen. You don't ask questions so you can jump in to share your opinion. And so if you're the extrovert in your marriage, you sometimes have to work at slowing down to give your spouse the time to talk, to speak at their speed, at their level.
Right.
Any other suggestions you'd have for an extrovert there on evaluating and taking steps?
This is not in our notes, but I would caution extroverts, sometimes even as an extrovert, you can exhaust yourself. And you are just going because you just love to be social and you just want to be involved in everything at church and you want all of the parties and all of the fellowship, whatever it is, that you do absolutely drain yourself. And I know David and I tend to, in our ministry, we do enjoy people. We love people and we want to be with them and we want to fellowship with them and we want to be a help to them and, of course, minister. But there does come a time where I think David mentioned in the episode last week where you have to be still and you have to know God and you have to allow Him to rebuild in you the strength that you need to reestablish in you some energy so that you can keep going. And I think sometimes extroverts need that caution of overbooking themselves and then coming to the end of themselves. And an extrovert does tend to be aggressive even when they're overly tired and overly extended, so that then your extroversion comes out as some type of aggression in your family. Maybe you're easily irritated or easily bothered or frustrated at your family because you're overextended yourself and you haven't taken the time to just rest and let your heart to be at peace. And so we have to be careful about that. I think even as extroverts, you just don't want to pack yourself so full that you don't get the recharge that introverts often talk about. Well, I just need to recharge. Well, maybe they're onto something there a little bit and you just come apart and let your heart be at peace.
Absolutely. And that's why as an extrovert, you need to make sure you're having your devotional time with God.
Yes.
You are slowing down enough to get alone with God. Be still and know that I'm God is an essential element of Christianity.
Yes.
That quietness, that quiet your heart so you can hear the voice of God. Quiet your heart so that you can grow, so you can evaluate, so that God can work in your life.
Yes.
So that's just some thoughts to extroverts. How about to introverts?
Well, an introvert needs to also realize that relationships are built on talking and listening.
Yeah, the extrovert probably needs to focus a little bit more on listening, but the introvert perhaps more on talking.
Well, maybe on just being around people enough to talk or to listen to talk.
I put in my notes that shyness, which may have been the old word we would have used to describe an introvert.
Yes.
Shyness is not an excuse for not serving others. So we should never excuse ourselves and say, well, I'm just an introvert, so I'm not going to sign up to serve in this area in the church, or I'm just an introvert, so my spouse is just going to have to get over it. We should never allow our personality to cause us to withdraw, to damage, to refuse to serve others.
Right.
And so what a lesson there.
And I would even just put in there too, that just like an extrovert needs to be careful that they don't overextend themselves. I would challenge then the introverts. Some of us, we're just like, well, I did that one thing. You know, I had that one, I go to church on Sunday morning. That's a lot for me. And then I'm just drained the rest of, the week or half the week. And so I can't get back to church until Wednesday. So I did that one thing. And introverts sometimes, instead of being like, well, I checked that off my list, you do need to extend yourself just a little bit more. And maybe our church, I know our church has what we call the next step. What's the next step you need to take, whether it's joining the church, whether it's becoming part of a connection group, whether it's then going out and actually joining in a ministry. Maybe you need to take that next step as an introvert and say, okay, yes, all right, I serve in the nursery, and that's good because it's just a small bit of ladies who are in there, and then it's just children, and I feel comfortable there, but maybe I need to take that next step and join the choir, or maybe I need to take that next step and become part of the senior care ministry so I can minister to the senior saints in our church, whatever it is. Introverts need to have caution that they don't underextend themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And, I just was thinking this through about in the introversion and extroversion, the thing we keep making a point here is that it's about others. It's about others. It's about others.
Right.
And so we do have to look for ways to serve others, to be involved and to be aware of. And each of us are called of God to live the Christian life.
Yes.
And that involves our relationship in our marriage, our relationship in our family, and it certainly involves our relationship in our church.
Yes.
And so what a good reminder there. I put a verse in our text here about he that hath friends must show himself friendly. And we do have to focus sometimes on, I need to be friendly. I need to smile. I need to reach out. I need to talk. And especially perhaps if you're an introvert, that might be a good verse for you to think about. I think one other side to this that's not even in our notes, but one of the things that's complicated this matter further is social media. Because you'll find an extrovert on social media is very fast to jump in and share an opinion, very fast to jump in and declare the right way, can be very aggressive. And an introvert, on the other hand, can take social media and feel like I am connected. I just posted on social media a picture of me doing whatever. I am connected. I have 300 people who liked my photo on social media. And yet social media is not the real life situation that many of us make it out to be in our culture.
Yes.
Real life situations involves communicating verbally, seeing people's response on their face, reading their body language, hearing their heart, seeing their heart, hearing their voice, seeing their voice. Because if the one thing we know about social media can appear to say any number of things that I didn't mean that at all. That is not what I intended to say.
True.
What you heard is not what I meant. And God designed us face-to-face conversations, not face-to-face. Let me try that again. Face-to-face interactions, because that's a heart-level connection.
Yes.
That allows me to see a person's personality, their emotions, their thinking. And you can tell when you're, talking to a person one-on-one whether or not they're agreeing or disagreeing.
Right.
And that's not a time to get into a fist fight or a word fight. That's a time to say, okay, and I can tell you don't agree, so what's going on here? And so be aware that social media can completely make you think things that are not true. Don't rely on social media if you're an introvert to be your connection to people.
Right. And I would also, it's just been my observation that social media is a comfortable interaction level for introverts. I have met so many people who are prolific on social media. They will share all kinds of things. They post, maybe posting multiple times a day. And then I meet them because I think, wow, this person must really enjoy other people. And then I meet them and they don't at all. They're very much an introvert. And so introverts do be cautious about that, okay, I have my comfort level. I do have my connection because I have social media, and this gives me this great platform to be, an introvert in real life, but an extrovert out there. And we really do need that actual physical connection.
Absolutely. So now we're going to run out of time fairly soon. So let's jump into the final two things here. Let's discuss the steps we ought to take regarding our spouse's introversion or extroversion. Because one of the things that shows up when Beth and I counsel couples or just in casual conversation is that often a spouse will say, well, I'm an extrovert and he's an introvert. And sometimes that can be a positive, laughing thing. Other times it can be kind of a, there's things I'd love to do, but he won't, or she won't, or I don't like
Right.
that, but she does, or he does. And then it's followed up with those words, well, it's because he's an extrovert, or it's because she's an introvert, or whatever.
Right.
And let's just give some thoughts about that. And we can start here. Don't make your spouse's personality an issue.
Yes.
Just that's how God designed them. Are there weaknesses to it? Probably. We all have weaknesses. I don't know if you know this or not, but you married a sinner. And if you don't know that,
your spouse married a sinner.
And if you don't know that, just stay married a little while and you're going to find that out. But I think that's just a given, but we don't make it a personality issue. And in light of that, then I would say to them, we have to love each other for who we are.
Yes.
And how would you make that practical?
I would say in your words, and then just in your daily life, and also in your scheduling. So you love that person for who they are in your words, instead of rolling your eyes and sighing and being derogatory in your words about, oh my word, your extroversion is just exhausting me. Or, oh my goodness, can't you just come out of yourself just a little bit so that we can enjoy ourselves? Instead of being that way, in your words, affirm your spouse. Say, you know what? I know that looking forward to this church fellowship or going to our connection class party is important to you. And so, and I know that just really charges you and that you really enjoy being around a lot of people. So for you, yes, we can put this on the schedule. So love them for who they are in your words.
That's good.
In your daily life, being aware of them. You know what? Have you been going a lot as an extrovert and you haven't been thinking about your introverted spouse who probably needs a little bit of a charge? Then think to yourself, you know what? Today we're going to take those things off the schedule, or I'm not going to push them to go out and about. Let's just have a quiet evening. And then with your scheduling, David and I, this is something that we do, not necessarily based on our personality, but almost every morning, or even the night before, we will say, what is on your schedule? And we think about each other in that scheduling. I guess because of David's calling and his gifting, the Lord has given him a lot of extroversion. But he is very aware of in his scheduling, whether it be of our revival meetings or family conferences, whatever it is, he does understand that there are times that it's just good for us to be home, whether that's based on our personality or just based on physically we need to have that time to rest. But I think, too, he's aware of me. There are times where it's just we've been around a lot of people, and I'm thinking to myself, goodness, I feel like I haven't even talked to my children. I'm talking to all these other people. And so he just is very aware of that in his scheduling, and I appreciate that very much. So maybe that could be something that you as an introvert or extrovert could be aware of, your scheduling for your family, whether you're out and about or planning evenings in based
really
on
good.
personality.
Yeah, so you dealt with words, with scheduling, several really good pieces of advice there. Before we give the last thing here, just a reminder in your marriage with your spouse, make their personality traits a matter that is endearing.
Yes.
So don't allow it to become a sarcastic, condescending, frustrating matter. Find it endearing that your spouse is more introverted, or find it endearing that your spouse is more extroverted. Never allow that to become a source of sarcastic phraseology, or commenting, or cause it to put angst in your heart towards your spouse. Oh my word, they are just always so wanting to stay at home, or vice versa.
Right.
So make it endearing. Keep it a very loving matter. God designed your spouse, so love them and just celebrate it.
Yes.
And then give of yourself to meet the needs of your spouse. That's especially important.
It is.
And if your spouse needs friendship, then you give of yourself to, they need social interaction, you give of yourself in those social interaction moments. And if your spouse needs the quiet time, you give of yourself to make sure they're getting the quiet, the evenings at home, or the time to recharge, as so many people use that word with introverts.
Yes.
And so that's all important in a marriage. Any final thoughts before we talk about children?
I would say, as far as giving of yourself to meet the needs, it could even be done separately. It doesn't have to be that you always have to go together to a fellowship or whatever. If it's your connection class party and you're in a young marrieds class, obviously you probably should go together. But let's say the husband is introverted and he knows that his wife loves that social interaction because she's an extrovert. Maybe encourage her then to get together with her friends. Say, hey, I'm going to be really tired from working all week on Friday night or on Saturday. Why don't you try to get together with your friends and go out and have some time? And that will recharge her and that she will come home happy and all excited to tell you every little thing that they talked about and maybe overwhelm you as an introvert.
I don't know what you're talking about there.
With what she has to say. But, just encourage. Or
Yes.
if maybe it's the other way around, maybe your wife is an introvert. Well, you find time to go out with your buddies, have a game, go out and hike together, do whatever you do together, and allow her just some quiet time at home to read her book. And as David said earlier, maybe it was last week or this week, I don't remember now, but just stay home and pet her cat. That was really funny. Or read her books or watch her Hallmark chick flicks or whatever she watches.
Okay, so that's about marriage. Now we're going to run out of time
Yes.
here, but let's take a moment and talk about how to help our children regarding these matters. If you have a son or daughter that's an introvert or an extrovert, how do you help them with that? And then and I listed 5 things, and let's just list them and then talk about them.
Right. I would say right up front, you want to train your child. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But also I would say you need to accept who your child is and don't try to turn them into who you are in your personality trait.
In other words, you cannot turn an extroverted child into an introverted child without doing damage and causing major trouble down the road.
Absolutely.
And you can't turn an introvert into an extrovert without frustrating them.
Yes.
And the Bible is very clear that as parents, we are not to anger or frustrate our children.
Yes.
And so what we would say is that either side of this equation, we still have to train our children to speak to others and how to speak to others. Mm-hmm. An introvert can still speak to others. I know one of our daughters was very introverted, and as a young girl would tend to just pull away and be very, very, very shy, but still learned how to look at others and speak to them when spoken to. Right. Smile at people first.
Yes.
And even though the personality never changed, she learned to take the personality and use it for the benefit of others.
Absolutely.
And that's even paid off now that she's an adult.
Yes. And we have another daughter who has no trouble speaking to others.
And we're training her the other way.
Sometimes we have to remind her to use a little bit of discernment and also just to stop and listen.
Listen, which is the second thing we put on our list. Train our children to speak to others, but also train them to listen to others. I say frequently to our kids when they're on their way to church, I'll say, smile first and speak first. Smile first and speak first. And start a conversation. Smile first, speak first, start a conversation. And starting a conversation is about talking. It's about coming out of yourself and talking, but it's also about getting the other person to start talking, and then you're listening. That's where conversations start.
Right.
And that's something that can take a long time to train our children to do, especially in the era of social media. I don't know how many times I go to church now, and children never speak to adults because they are staring at their phones. And I'm one of those people that often try to connect to teenagers. But I've had teenagers more often, more times than I care to count, who have actually been a little bothered. And it was very obvious they were bothered. You are interrupting my game, or you are interrupting my texting. I'm listening to a song, and you want to talk to me. And moms and dads, that's unacceptable because we have to train our children that their personality is not about them. Their personality is about reaching out, about serving others, about talking, about listening, about interacting, about learning how to relate to people face to face.
Right.
And so maybe, I don't know, moms and dads, maybe you should make a rule there. No games at church. Don't be on your phone at church unless you absolutely have to be. Those are just some practical steps you can take because it's about training our children not to allow their personality to hinder them. We even have to train our children to smile at others. And that's a big thing we do in the family. Smile first. Smile first. And sometimes a smile can disarm everybody.
Right.
If you come into a room and you're an extrovert and you walk in and automatically take over, you probably are going to drive people away from you. But if you walk in and you smile genuinely at people to begin with, then you're connecting on a higher level. And if you're an introvert, don't walk into a room with awareness of what are people thinking about me? They're judging me. No, you walk into a room and you're there for others. You walk into the room. It's not about you. It's about smiling at others, about meeting their needs.
Right.
There's a couple of others here we would say. What are those final two?
Train our children to be grateful and to say so.
That's huge.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So if someone speaks to your child and they compliment them, or maybe they do something for your child should say thank you. And they should look thankful. And if that's a problem, if you have a child who's very shy, introverted, or maybe you have a child who's extroverted and someone does something for them and they're just too busy with their friends to stop and say thank you, then you need to have a conversation with your child and reinforce that.
And train them to serve others and not themselves.
Yes.
Any of these we could park on a little bit longer perhaps, but we're out of time today. And I hope you've enjoyed this series on emotions and personalities. We'd love to hear from you, so reach out to us. Send us any stories you have or any illustrations you have. We'd love to hear those. We'd also be happy to receive any questions that you have regarding any of these matters as well.
Yes.
You've been listening to Keeping It Young, and we're glad you've joined us. And this week ahead, we hope you'll serve the Lord with gladness.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.